Greater Creators is a study of creative icons who push the boundaries of art and whose influence can still be felt today. So take a seat, class is in session.
Today we're talking about the man who took the medium of comics to the next level, extraordinary English gentleman, Alan Moore. What's up, guys? I'm Comic Book Girl 19 and welcome to Greater Creators. Alan Moore upended the superhero genre with Watchmen. He further complicated the Dark Knight's greatest and craziest foe in Batman the Killing Joke. And his V for Vendetta is the main reason so many modern cultural saboteurs, protesters, and anarchists wear Guy Fawkes masks.
Time for an opening rant about Alan Moore. Go!
I totally get why he's a super curmudgeon, okay? Like, this guy is like grumpy, all right? He is like #1 grump, but I totally get it, because this guy is just like in a league of his own, like as far as his thoughts go. And I respect the fact that he doesn't want to have his comic books turned into movies because he doesn't want to, like, he gave the money away from Watchmen. He was like, I don't even want any money from this. Like, don't even put that in my bank account, you motherfuckers, you know? And that's just like, what an amazing attitude. Like, who does that? He stands for principles, okay? He's like, no, this is my art. It should be a comic. This is how I wrote it. I don't want to see it on the big screen. And, you know, they keep putting it up there and they keep bumming him out and he keeps not taking the money for it. And it's amazing. Although I would be scared to, like, if I saw him, I would be scared to, like, say anything to him because he's like kind of a scary dude. But even if he was a dick to me, I would just be like, he was a dick to me. Like, it's so funny, because that's, I mean, you probably expect that he would be, you know, especially me. I would probably annoy him so much.
So you think Alan Moore's a little scary?
Yeah, he's a little scary. He's totally a little scary, but, you know, he's still a human being. He's still an awesome guy. Now, let's talk about one of Alan Moore's greatest works, Watchmen. One of the things I love most about Watchmen is how incredibly layered it is. Outside the main narrative, the comic is stuffed with subplots offering insights into the motivations behind each of its many main characters. Watchmen's central plot begins with a murder mystery. Who killed the comedian, a retired member of a defunct superhero team called the Crime Busters, and why? These questions cause former members of the Crime Busters to come out of forced retirement and leads them to discover a massive conspiracy with worldwide implications. Throughout this narrative, Moore dissects everything from superheroes as fascist vigilantes, free will and determinism, moral relativism, nuclear Armageddon, what it means to be human, what it means to be a god, and the medium of comics itself. Watchmen is considered one of Alan Moore's best and most influential works that helped to elevate the medium of comics towards greater sophistication, and is the only graphic novel to win a Hugo Award, and is the only graphic novel to appear on Time Magazine's 2005 list of the top 100 best English language novels from 1923 to present. Alan was born November 18th, 1953 in Northampton. From the age of 5, he was a voracious reader, consuming anything available to him, including comic books, which he could totally get his hands on. Moore grew up poor in a working class area. He was a top student when he was in primary school, but then later on he tested into a better school, and that's where he encountered middle class and upper class kids for the first time. And he went from being like the top student to being the lowest student, so he quickly lost interest in his studies. He came to believe that there was a covert curriculum in play, one indoctrinating students with punctuality, obedience, and the acceptance of monotony. The man's onto something. Even though he wasn't a huge fan of school, he was writing poems and essays on his own, and he was publishing them in fanzines like his own Embryo, and became part of a group known as the Northampton Arts Lab. 2 weeks after his grandmother's death, Moore was expelled from high school for selling LSD, and he was, by his own description, one of the world's most inept LSD dealers. The headmaster of that school warned all of the other schools Moore may have applied to afterwards, writing letters calling him a corrupting influence and a psychopath, therefore blocking him from being able to get into any other schools. Blacklisted. Because school wasn't an option, Alan Moore had to go get a real job, and he wound up working at a tannery pulling sheepskins out of tanks of urine and blood.
Ew, gross.
He later recounted that he and his coworkers used to throw testicles at each other to relieve the boredom. That's what kind of terrible job this was. He was later fired after he got caught smoking dope in the men's bathroom, which I don't blame him. I mean, come on. So afterwards, he got a job cleaning toilets in a hotel. Not long after that, he began writing and illustrating his own comics in the mid-70s. Moore said, "Quitting my day job and becoming a comics writer was a tremendous risk. But anything of value in our lives, whether that be a career or a work of art or a relationship, will always start with such a leap." Moore learned the craft of writing on his own, doing short stories in 3 to 4 pages. One of his first works was for famous British anthology series 2000 AD. He was also employed by Marvel UK, who bought some of his stories for Star Wars Weekly and Doctor Who Weekly before enlisting him to take over on Captain Britain. Later, he was hired by creator-friendly publisher Warrior Magazine, where he launched V for Vendetta and Marvel Man. Alan Moore politically identifies himself as an anarchist and explores many of his ideas around the subject in his hugely influential comic V for Vendetta. The story revolves around the main character V, a mysterious man in a Guy Fawkes mask who is on a quest of revenge and aims to right the societal wrongs committed by a dystopian United Kingdom government controlled by the fascist Norsefire Party. Both V and Moore believe government is inherently corrupt and that their authority directly infringes upon human freedom, and that true personal freedom requires discipline, education, and a lot of hard work. It's not enough to free oneself from the yoke of government tyranny, but that one also has to free one's own mind from ignorance and weakness. The massive, resounding cultural influence of this comic can be felt by the surging popularity of the iconic Guy Fawkes mask being actively adopted by protesters, anarchists, and hacktivists today, becoming an international symbol of popular revolution. In an interview in Entertainment Weekly, Moore said that he was quite heartened to see protesters wearing Guy Fawkes masks on the news.
It was the mask of his character V which became a symbol of the Occupy movement.
Encouragingly, it is moving towards anarchic fluid structures such as those adopted by Anonymous and Occupy, and it is becoming much more a thing of the individual, which has to be the basic social unit.
For both of his stories in Warrior Magazine, Moore was awarded the British Eagle for Best Comics Writer in 1982 and 1983, leading to greater recognition and a new job working for American mainstream comics publisher DC. In 1983, DC let him play around with their struggling Swamp Thing series, allowing him to pretty much do whatever he wanted. And he made it into a work of art, with tons of social commentary, pathos, and existentialism. He also introduced the working-class magician John Constantine in Swamp Thing. Constantine would then go on to headline his own series, Hellblazer, and later have his own movie and television series.
Before you checked yourself in here, you were working as an exorcist and master of the dark arts?
That says master, does it? Well, I should really change that to petit dabbler. I hate to put on airs.
Moore's next big project with DC became one of his greatest works, Watchmen. The whole thing started when DC had bought the rights to the Charlton Comics characters that had begun in the 1940s. And so Alan Moore started writing a story to finish these characters off called Who Killed the Peacemaker. But then DC went back and they were like, you know what? You can't use those characters because we're going to integrate them in our DC universe. And so he was like, well, I've already written this story with these characters in mind. So he had to create analogs of these characters that were their own deal.
Wow, I had no idea Watchmen characters came from a previous comics universe.
Yes. In fact, you have Blue Beetle and The Question, who are still running around within the DC universe, who started out as Charlton Comics characters. And if you look in Watchmen, Rorschach is obviously The Question, and Night Owl is totally Blue Beetle. It actually worked out in his favor. Watchmen was revolutionary in its exploration of bigger themes like identity, law and order, freedom, time, and patriotism. Now, even though Watchmen changed the comics industry, Moore believes comics learned the wrong lessons from Watchmen and continues to have many reservations about its lingering effects. He wasn't trying to turn every superhero into an angry and violent psychopath. He was just trying to broaden the scope of how these stories could be told. In 1987, DC published Moore's Batman the Killing Joke, and Moore also wrote classic stories starring Superman, Green Lantern, and more V for Vendetta. Alan Moore's Batman the Killing Joke is famous for bringing Batman back to his darker roots and for its origin story of the Joker. This comic explores the idea that both Batman and the Joker are mirror images of one another, that they are both insane, creations of random and tragic events of one bad day in their lives. In The Killing Joke, the Joker engineers one bad day for Commissioner Gordon to test his theory that there is a nugget of insanity in everyone that is just waiting for the right moment to spring forth.
Coming this summer,
How did I get here anyway?
Robot is stuck inside his house, and he can't leave.
This house is old and scary.
But this house also happens to be haunted.
Hello? Who's there?
Now, the only thing for Robot to do is to read scary horror comics from the 1950s.
Oh my gosh. Oh, this comic is scary.
Comics that happen to have been banned.
Oh my god. Banned horror comics.
Coming this summer, it's the pilot episode of Robot's Bedtime Stories. Only on the Robot Adventures channel. Subscribe today and ring the bell to be notified of all future Robot episode releases.
By the end of the 80s, Alan Moore had a falling out with DC over creators' rights issues.
Oh, what kind of issues?
Well, Space Brain, specifically, Moore contends that he and his collaborator were promised that no other creators would be given the reins to produce Watchmen stories after then. He's even said that DC refused to give work to a friend of his who needed the money in order to leverage him into giving up more of his rights. What? That's down and dirty, DC.
I guess he's not a fan of the After Watchmen series that just came out recently.
No, he isn't. And I didn't read it because I don't need to. Watchmen begins and ends with Watchmen. It's funny, at some point DC offered Alan Moore the rights to Watchmen back, but only if he would agree to write prequels and sequels. Moore said that if they had said that 10 years ago when I asked them for that originally, then yeah, it might have worked. But these days, I don't want Watchmen back. Certainly, I don't want it back under these kind of terms. And yes, even though Alan Moore is grumpy, I generally agree with his complaints as a working artist. He thinks that too many artists have had to sell their soul to the corporate system, having to create what the companies think the fans want just to make a buck off of them, instead of giving the audience works of true substance. Alan Moore has integrity as an artist, and he has integrity for you as a reader, and has stated, "It is not the job of the artist to give the audience what the audience wants. If the audience knew what they needed, they wouldn't be the audience. It is the job of artists to give the audience what they need." And I love that he stands up for himself, because too many artists out there, especially in the comics medium, have been pushed around, pressured, and taken advantage of by the man. Just look at poor Jack Kirby. That guy created the vast majority of the Marvel Universe and was totally screwed over. Most people don't even know his name. Moore returned to the indie world, where he produced a lot of important work, including a couple of collaborations with one of my favorite artists, Bill Sienkiewicz.
Oh, I love Bill Sienkiewicz.
I do too, he's super nice. In 1991, Moore published The Lost Girls.
Ooh, what's that about?
Well, Space Brain, The Lost Girls is all about Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and Wendy from Peter Pan getting together and swapping stories of their sexual adventures.
What?
Yeah. It is illustrated by Moore's wife, Melinda Gebbie, and some people call it porn, but Alan Moore believes that eroticism can be an art form, and that's what he was trying to do with Lost Girls.
Sounds like filth.
Sex is a part of life, man. Sometimes you gotta write about it.
Now you're selling sex and drugs to children.
Well, to the internet. The internet is...
The internet is children.
The internet is not innocent, okay? Come on. Let's be real here.
I'm only 13 years old.
Also in the early 90s, Alan Moore spent a few years at creator-controlled Image Comics, writing stories starring Todd McFarlane's Spawn characters,
Yes!
Jim Lee's Wildcats,
Oh, yes!
and Deadpool co-creator Rob Liefeld's Supreme.
I love Supreme.
I know you do.
This was his best work. This is where his career took off.
A lot of Moore's fans were appalled that he would write for the puerile titles at Image. However, Alan Moore responded saying, "I'd become aware of how much the comics audience had changed while I'd been away since 1988. That all of a sudden it seemed that the bulk of the comics audience really wanted things that had almost no story. Just lots of big full-page pinup sort of pieces of artwork. And I was genuinely interested to see if I could write a decent story for that market."
Well, maybe that's because Alan Moore secretly loved those giant guns and hyper-detailed muscles, because it's awesome.
In 1999, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was released via America's Best Comics, Moore's imprint with Jim Lee's Wildstorm Productions. He also wrote Tom Strong and several other well-received titles at ABC Comics, including Promethea. Ever since his falling out with DC, Moore intended to stay in the independent creator-owned circuit, which is why he created America's Best Comics with Jim Lee's Wildstorm imprint. But in a horrific twist of fate, Jim Lee ended up selling Wildstorm to DC just before America's Best Comics launch, so now Alan Moore is back working under DC, and I'm sure he was so bummed.
He almost got tricked into coming back.
Yeah, he got screwed. He got screwed. I'm sure him and Jim Lee are like not friends. I don't know, this is speculation, but I have a feeling that Moore is super bummed on Jim Lee for doing that.
Back under the man.
Now, DC wasn't supposed to be interfering with Moore's America's Best Comics, but they did. And they ended up destroying an entire print run of one issue of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen over a joke, okay? So the story goes, Alan Moore had put a real advertisement from the turn of the century for something called Marvel brand douches, okay? But the comic had already been printed, so they just had to throw them away. They just threw them away.
Wow, do you think it's possible any of those issues still exist out there somewhere? Like maybe in a landfill or something?
Actually, they do. Some of them did escape, and they go for like a lot of money, okay? They're like a super collector's item. DC also blocked another one of Moore's comics that was in the anthology series Tomorrow's Stories. They just were not having it with Alan Moore and his craziness.
So Alan Moore and mainstream comic books just don't work out well.
Yeah, pretty much. And Alan Moore now is like, nah, he's been indie ever since then. He's been partnering up for one-off deals or working on projects set in the Lovecraft universe or on League and its spin-off Big Nemo with other various companies.
That's why I'm staying independent with my Fish Monster series. Nobody's getting the rights to this baby but me.
It's smart. Now, besides being a comic book writer, Alan Moore is also an occultist and anarchist. In 1993, on his 40th birthday, he came out of the broom closet, so to speak, and openly declared himself a ceremonial magician.
A magician? So now he's pulling rabbits out of hats?
No, like we're talking Western esotericism, okay? Hermeticism. We're talking about Kabbalah, okay? We're talking about all that weird stuff, okay? Ritual magic is what we're talking about right now. Okay? Because the thing is he was doing all of this research on the occult when he was writing From Hell. And he wrote this one word balloon where it said, the one place where gods inarguably exist is in the mind. And like after he read that, he was like, holy fuck, that's really true. That's really true. And he had to rearrange his whole life around it because he had stumbled upon a truth while writing From Hell.
So you're saying he isn't a magician, or he is? I'm confused.
I think you're going to have to explain to Robot the difference. He's not going to understand these sorts of things.
Okay, you're gonna get beat up later, Space Brain. You better be careful. Robot, let me just tell you what Alan Moore says about magic, okay? Maybe this will help you, all right? He says, what is magic? There's a confusion. Magic, in its earliest form, is referred to as the art. And I believe this is completely literal. I believe that magic is art, and that art is literally magic. Art is like magic, the science of manipulating words, symbols, or images to achieve changes in consciousness. The very language of magic seems to be talking as much about writing or art as it is about supernatural events. To cast a spell is simply to spell, manipulating words to change people's consciousness. This is why I believe a writer or an artist is the closest thing in the modern world to a shaman. Wow. I'm about it. I'm all about it.
But can he pull a rabbit out of a hat, though?
No. You're not gonna get this one, Robot. We're just gonna move on. Yeah, he pulls rabbits out of hats. That's what he does.
Finally, gosh, was it that hard? Oh, I should be teaching this class.
Oh, there's the bell. But we're not done with Alan Moore yet. Join us in part 2, where we're going to talk about Alan Moore's magical comic Promethea and why he hates movies and TV shows based on his own works. Join us next time on Greater Creators, where we're going to discuss the works of other amazing creators who influenced generations. Class dismissed.
Creators is a study of creative icons who push the boundaries of art and whose influence can still be felt today. So take a seat, class is in session.